We're at the 102nd Pennsylvania Farm Show, and joining me this afternoon is the Secretary of Agriculture of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Russ Redding. Thank you so much for sitting down and having a conversation with me.
Honored to be here.
As we were talking just before we went on camera, I was reflecting on the preparation that goes into someone being an exhibitor here, particularly animals.
Yeah.
It was about 5 degrees a few days ago. Right now we're experiencing a heat wave. It's above freezing. And my daughters are out there in the barn, bundled up in an unheated barn, and they're trying to get their sheep ready for show time. How much of that behind the scenes do you get to see? Maybe you've experienced it personally, the kind of work that goes into getting an animal or a project or an exhibit ready for the farm show.
Yeah, it's sort of the untold story, right? Everybody comes in here and you think it's nice and they're nice and clean, and it just sort of arrives here in a nice 8x8 pen and everything's fine. That's not the way it works, right? It's all of the lead up time, not just in the last couple of weeks of getting final prep for the farm show, but all of the months and months that go into the selection of animal. You've got, kids who go through this exercise of, okay, I'm going to be on the show circuit, which then commits you to certain things, which gets you to certain testing requirements, on and on. And that's what's in the barns here at the farm show. So we see, this final product of an exhibit, of an animal, of something else, some other 4-H product. Just know that there are a lot of time and very huge commitment there.
Sure. I'm walking into the barn and I followed them in a few minutes after they got started, in the scarves, the hats, the whole 9 yards, bib overalls, getting ready and working on the animal. Now, we had brought the animal in off the field. There were some transitional things that went on. I mean, I knew this was coming, and I'm sure they knew it was coming, but it was something that they were enjoying doing.
Yeah.
All right, they had their stand set up, and I was facing the animal, and the animal's wrestling a little bit, so I was just humming a little tune. I'm not sure if it made it better or worse, but they knew this work was coming, and they knew this pressure was coming, and they were fully accepting of it.
Yeah.
I didn't have to ask them to go out there.
Right.
They knew there were certain times they had to take care of them, and the level of preparation. It's a character builder. Pennsylvania agriculture is about that, work ethic.
Listen, that's the story, right? I admire these 4-H and FFA members and who are in these projects and the extra commitment, right? You didn't have to tell them to go to the barn, right? They knew that they had a responsibility for that animal and the care of that animal. I mean, that's intuitive if you're in this business of animal agriculture, particularly an exhibitor here at the farm show. So I admire what they do. That's the character building. It's the anticipation of what they should do that makes those great employees and great citizens, right? They anticipate the question, and we don't have enough of them. So
I always tell them the prizes are given out in the barns back home.
Yeah.
I said, I don't know how this is going to turn out for you, whether it's going to be a first or a sixth place ribbon, but your character that you're developing and your work ethic and your commitment is going to carry you through life. Now, we are gentlemen farmers, truth be told. That means we enjoy what we're doing as we're losing money doing it. So we've got a handful of sheep, some alpaca, the perfunctory chickens and ducks and things like that. But rewinding backwards just a little bit more, these last couple weeks were really, really brutal.
yeah.
And we don't have heated troughs on our farm. And they are carrying those 5-gallon buckets out there, and we're talking 18-year-old, I have 5 daughters, 18 years old, and we had a 15-year-old, a 12-year-old, and even the 9-year-old was carrying some stuff out there. So, I mean, they're hauling this stuff out there, and it's like, if you leave the door open in 0-degree weather for more than a few seconds, someone's yelling at it, but they went out there, and they were working with their animals out in the field. And so it's bigger than even farm show prep. It's a lifestyle, and it can be really tough.
Yeah, listen, it can be therapeutic. It can be incredibly difficult. What we find are folks who are doing it, you really want to do it, right? You really have a passion for ag, for the care of those animals, the companionship of those animals, all of those life lessons that come from the owning livestock and being in competitive environments and show rings, but really appreciate when people do it.
We just walked by a ring, and the alpaca were over there, and they were dressed in costumes. And since we have alpaca, my daughters are kind of riveted looking down there. there's a little bit of an irony, I think a little disconnect in terms of the average person and the ag person, because I've had several neighbors say to me, is that alpaca warm enough, out there? And then the sheep, are they warm enough out there? I mean, it's really, I said, there's actually a reason why they're out of the barn right now, like rolling around. If you're an alpaca and your fiber has significantly more insulating value than wool, that's really where you want to be. I said, now the time to check with us whether the animals are having a problem or not, come around July or August. And if we don't have them shorn, but so the doors open here, and people get to experience that window and opportunity and ask questions and interact. And I'm going to guess that their appreciation for agriculture rises once they enter this complex.
That's the goal. This is 1 million square feet of classroom, right? For 8 days, you get a chance to come in here, and things that most will maybe drive by or are completely unaware of. They get a chance to see it here, to touch it here, to feel it, smell it, look at it, and really try to understand it. So if we can do one thing, and that's connecting those who are in the business of ag with those who are, we're feeding and they're in the community who maybe have heard about agriculture but really don't know about it, they're generationally removed, we put them together here.
Talk to us just for a minute about the international reach of this farm show and the rodeo and the events that go on around this complex. I know we've had contestants from all over the world, and I know the ag influence of Pennsylvania reaches worldwide as well.
Yeah, it's sort of an international spot for agriculture in January. We have embassies that come up from Washington, D.C., the agricultural attaches. There's a lot of discussion about what's happening in trade and negotiations. We have some of those folks here over the weekend. We'll be here throughout the week. But you also have companies here that reach international, and some of their sales representatives and folks are here to get a sense of this show and who's here, but also it's a good test of what consumers are interested in. So it's good.
Who are we competing against, Russ, just for a moment here, not only in global, but other states? In Pennsylvania, hardwoods, they're top shelf. We've got a very significant dairy industry in Pennsylvania, field crops, apples, peaches. Who are our competitors out there? And maybe a little inside window, some come in here trying to figure out how they're going to gain an edge on us and how well we're doing or how efficient we are.
Yeah, so our competitors, if you're in the livestock, excuse me, in the livestock sector, that could be dairy or any of the protein components. You're New York, you're in the neighborhood. Maryland is decent in terms of poultry and beef cattle. Ohio and points west in the beef industry. Equine is certainly further to the south. But there are domestic competitors. Internationally, Canada is a significant competitor. They also happen to be our #1 export destination. $1.2 billion go into Canada. Mexico, so that NAFTA piece is pretty important to us, but it doesn't stop there. I mean, the Asian countries are important, Europe's important. The hardwoods, it's going to be China is a really big and significant buyer. That's pros and cons to that.
Number one purchaser of Pennsylvania hardwoods.
#1, right?
Yeah.
So, but it's one of the stories. You've got to compete in this business too, because there's nothing guaranteed here. There's not a guaranteed market. Right? Consumers have all kinds of options, and trying to make sure that at least our neighbors in Pennsylvania understand what's here and why do we invest in animal health and why we invest in land, farm, and preservation. All of that's embedded in this question of agriculture's importance.
Where do you think we are in terms of the state of Pennsylvania agriculture, the health of it, whether we're talking about some of the diseases out there literally in terms of the health of it, or spotted lanternfly? Does the future look bright? Somebody wants to get in agriculture in Pennsylvania, and they're saying, can I make a living at this? Can this really be fruitful? What would you say to that person?
I'd say that I've been around agriculture all my life, and I'm more optimistic today about the future of ag than I've been in a long time. And it's for two reasons. One is there's this rediscovery of agriculture important to our local community and the quality of life. And on top of that, it's got jobs and does a lot of those things that we need in addition to just food. And secondly, we have seen this sort of amazing sort of technology move where it's not about land-based necessarily, right? We've got aquaculture and hydroponics and aeroponics and indoor ag that are soilless, right? They're moving into metropolitan centers and urban centers. There are all sets of issues with that, right? But I think all of that is amazingly positive in terms of what agriculture can do.
In a few moments, we're going to step out of our chairs and we're going to go in some direction here. I'll probably be following a couple of my children.
Yeah.
Where do you like to go? What do you like to eat? What are some of your favorite exhibits? I know you can't have a favorite, but where do you head from here when you need something to eat or you want to relax and look at an exhibit?
Yeah, so part of the challenge is finding time to go too far from where we are, but there's a couple of things I like. One, there's comfort in a chocolate milkshake. So that is always sort of, for me, the most important. Just grab a milkshake. And then I like to sort of walk around, and when I do that, I walk around the family living area because I look at these quilts, I look at 4-H projects. I spend a lot of time in the show rings. I don't get a chance to really look at these individual projects, right? That people drop off here and maybe get a blue ribbon. I love to do that because it gives me a sense of Pennsylvania. When I go through, it gives me a real sense that our county fairs are a great link to this farm show, and you see that in that family living area.
The hardest thing that I had to do a couple hours ago was leave the house, and my two daughters who are going to be showing the sheep haven't arrived yet, was saying, you still got some work to do here, and the two younger ones, if I get a chance to go. But thanks for spending a few minutes with me, and let's go get that chocolate milkshake.
Excellent, great to see you, thank you.
Appreciate your work here, my friend.